Hello, good morning. I apologize for the new picture. I can't find my old picture, so you'll just have to enjoy this cutie picture. And we are reading The Mystery of History. I forgot where we are. I am not going to lie to you. It looks like we are on page 249. Because of his good character, Charles Eastman slowly overcame racial tensions at Beloit College. Okay, I remember this. Ohiosa had gone to college. He moved to attend Knox College. Are you remembering any of this?
Yes, I am now.
Graduated from Dartmouth. He got a medical degree from Boston University. So, he was also loved by his classmates and gave a speech at graduation. Okay, unfortunately, Charles Eastman, remember that's his new name. He went from Ohiosa to Charles Eastman. His brilliance was not going to help his people as much as he desired. When he returned to the Dakota, meaning the people, as a doctor, he found that even with medicine, his people were still perishing from disease that was brought to America by Europeans. The U.S. government were trying to negotiate with the Dakota. Let me see. I'm summarizing and taking out some things I don't think are appropriate. So the U.S. government wanted to build a railroad that would stretch from one coast to the other. But they needed the Indians to move towards farming and settling rather than I guess it doesn't say exactly. They were trying to encourage the Dakota to adopt a reservation life with farming and settling, meaning to settle the land rather than what they were doing before, which is basically kind of migrating with the herds and not having a permanent place. They kind of just move all over. And the U.S. government authorized thousands of bison, also called buffalo, to be killed. I'm not sure, is this for the railroad? I'm not sure why. So men like William Frederick Cody, also known as Buffalo Bill, men competed with each other to take out large numbers of buffalo in a short period of time. The staggering loss of the buffalo weakened the American Indians and increased their susceptibility to disease. I'm not sure why that is. It doesn't say. Why does it weaken them and increase their susceptibility to disease? I don't know. Charles Eastman was appointed government doctor to the Dakota. This is just before the Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890. This was a horrible event in South Dakota where 200 of the Dakota Indians were put to death by soldiers. Why? Well, it's difficult to determine the details. U.S. authorities feared a ghost dance uprising.
A what?
It was a spiritual uprising called a ghost dance by the American Indians. And they said that they responded to the Dakota who fired shots first. She says they claimed the Dakota fired shots first. So it sounds like she doesn't necessarily believe that that's true. I don't know at all. Regardless of who started it, a great number of the Dakota people had perished, so 200 of them. And Charles Eastman would never be the same. He wrote, "It took all of my nerve to keep my composure in the face of this spectacle. And in the excitement and grief of my Indian companions, nearly every one of whom was crying aloud or singing a death song." still holding on to two worlds, meaning the Dakota and the new American world, Charles Eastman married a compassionate woman named Elaine Goodale. Goodale? Don't know. She shared his vision of improving the relationship between the European Americans and the Dakota. He retired from medicine and worked in the government. He worked with and against the government for the sake of his people. He met with Congress, he befriended senators, and helped to get laws that might protect the Dakota. The Dakota refused to sign anything with the United States. They had been lied to and betrayed too many times. The U.S. government eventually drove the Dakota people onto reservations. With the offer of food rations, the United States, it says usurped the dignity of the Indians and diluted their way of life. I don't entirely agree with that.
I don't like that the U.S. drove them out.
I get it. Like, they were there. However, they hadn't settled the land. And I understand. They were there first, but, they were there, but then they go move somewhere else. There wasn't really a permanent settlement.
And then the United States couldn't go there.
So, the United States basically came and conquered the land. And they wanted the land. The Dakota also wanted the land. I get it that they were there, but I also get that they hadn't settled it. It was wide open country, wilderness. I get both sides, basically.
Now I do too.
So
they weren't exactly settled down. They just moved around.
They moved from place to place. It wasn't settled, and that's what kind of they were asking them to do. They were like, here, have this. Can you settle here? Sorry about that. They wanted the Dakota to settle, and they're like, you be over here, we'll be over here. But the Dakota were like, nope, that's not our way of life. And I get it, that's not their way of life. They're like, who are you to come tell us what our way of life is? So guess what happened? War. And they lost. And I don't like anything about that. I don't like the war. I don't like that people lost their lives. I don't like that people were brutal. But at this point, I don't think it's fair to look on it as the Europeans came and just decimated, the American Indians.
That was in the past.
Well, I mean, we should have like a time of mourning, but also a time of mourning for the other people who perished. I mean, as a country, if we keep focusing on these things, like, we're not going to move forward. We got to move forward, or we're just going to keep reliving these same, the atrocities and the division, and we're not going to move forward. We're just going to keep bringing it back up. We need to it happened. We need to go ahead and move forward as a country. I mean, just like, imagine like you're a country, you're trying to establish your borders, and there's this huge amount of land, and the American Indians are not there. They're, at that time, they're over here. And then you start to settle there. They're like, wait, no, that's part of our land too. And they're like, well, it's not settled. Like, they're like, yeah, but we're here, during this part of the season. Okay, well, and we'll go over here. No, we'll be over there in a few months.
Give us some land.
Well, you can't demand land, but they're kind of like, it hasn't been settled. It's kind of like, if it's your land, you kind of gotta make it yours. establish it.
Build the village there.
Defend it, make something like a fence, borders and boundaries, people. You need a fence around your yard, like when people come sit on our wall. Why do they sit there? Because it's there to be sat on. Now, if we had a higher fence, they wouldn't sit on it. Why? Because we put a border and a boundary there.
I see. That's their spot. Mm-hmm. Not ours.
But they're welcome to sit there, and I'm happy for them to do it.
Sort of like a little safe area.
Okay, we'll get off that because
We went on down a rabbit
we did.
hole.
We went down a rabbit hole, but I don't appreciate, because she says that they assert the dignity of the American Indians, but she doesn't really say how, and she just she paints it in this picture of how people have viewed it in the past that I don't entirely agree with. It's this view of it's the white people came in and just devastated everyone, and that is not true. Yeah, there's some elements that where some people were brutal. They weren't white. There was nobody that was a white person because that doesn't exist. But you're creating these pictures in people's minds that just encourage division and encourage hate. All right, I'm going to get off that now. She said, see, this is her sentence. White authorities believed it was quote unquote fair to offer the each Dakota family 160 acres and to insist they sell the rest of the land to the quote unquote white settlers. So do you see how she's saying it in a way that makes it seem like, number one, that they're these white people? There aren't white people. Do you mean European Americans? We're not. Why are you calling people? You don't call the Indians red people. Why don't you say the red people?
Because they're not red.
They have a reddish hue. I
How do
mean,
you like our tan back room?
like why don't you call them by the color of their skin? Because they're not totally red. Okay, that would be hateful. Yes, it would.
So would it be? They're called people. Well, they don't.
They're not white. Like this is the type of talk and framing, when you frame stuff like that just increases hate. And I understand what the European Americans were thinking, which is 160 acres per family. That's a lot of land. And what they're trying to do is saying, okay, there's this huge amount of land and y'all haven't settled it. So we're going to give you this amount of land because we're trying to settle the rest of the land. So y'all can have this, but we're going to settle the rest of the land. Like this whole huge, vast amount of land cannot just be unsettled.
Yeah, like an acre is huge. Our house is big and it's not even.
Each family gets 160 acres. That's a lot of land.
I wish we were Indians.
Don't say that.
I mean, like for the 160 acres.
Say, I wish we got 160 acres, although y'all do have American Indian heritage.
I would accept it.
Okay, let's see. She said what the European Americans did not realize was that they could not flourish in isolation. They weren't farmers, they were hunters. And they needed to stay together and follow the herds of the buffalo and freely roam the Great Plains. And confinement to these acres was going to ruin their way of life and lead to the destruction of their people, basically, is what she's saying.
Ew.
Okay, so they didn't realize that. Okay, well that doesn't make them like horrible people. They're trying to figure out a way to coexist and say, hey, we're trying to establish our country. You know, we're trying to settle this land. We see that you don't, but I mean, to say that we're just going to follow the buffalo wherever they roam.
You could roam into our territory.
Exactly. And they're like, and so the other side of that is, well, it was all the American Indians' territory. Not if you didn't settle it. You didn't settle it. So it's two different opinions, and it's two different ways to view it. And they're trying to
trying to make.
They're trying to come to some type of agreement with two different ways of thinking, and what happened was they didn't come to an agreement, so it ended up in war. Greatly disheartened by all of this, Charles Eastman gave up on politics after 20 years of struggling in Washington, D.C. He served President Theodore Roosevelt, President Coolidge, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Between 1894 and 97, he started 30 to 40 Indian chapters of the YMCA. That's weird.
What do you mean?
Because they don't want to settle, but they want to have YMCAs.
What's a YMCA?
YMCA is kind of like, it's like a little club where they have like gym equipment, and they probably didn't have gym equipment there, but it was kind of like where you could exercise together and it's a Christian association.
From America?
Yes. Charles was invited in 1910 to help found the Boy Scouts and the Campfire Girls to teach good characters and skills for outdoor living. In Miss Hobar's opinion, Charles Eastman was uniquely qualified to tell the tales of his people and to the European Americans to educate them. She again calls them white Americans, yet neglects to call the Indians red people. That's racism right there. But it's racism in a way where it's like she's trying to, and this is a lot of people that do this, trying to walk on the side, we've got to honor those people, we can't be racist, so we'll call these people white and we won't refer to the other people's color.
Huh?
You mean, if you're going to call them white, then you need to call the other people red.
Oh, but that's so racist. Well, so is calling people white and black.
It is. It's racist. It's making a judgment about someone based on the color of their skin. That is the definition of racism. I'm going to look at you and determine in my mind what color you most look like, and I'm going to throw you in that group by calling you a color. That's racism.
This back room is tan.
For the sake of his 6 children and his wife, Charles Eastman wrote 11 books about his experience in the 2 conflicting worlds. He wrote Indian Boyhood, The Soul of the Indian, and From the Deep Woods to Civilization. They are wonderful to read. For the benefit of all Americans, Eastman also wrote Indian Heroes and Great Chieftains. There's a sad ending to his story. Charles and his wife separated in their later years. Charles and Elaine had very different ideas for the American Indians. Elaine wished that they would fully adopt the new American ways, and Charles changed his views over time and hoped for coexistence of both cultures. Cherishing his heritage, he retired to a cabin on Lake Huron and returned to wearing his traditional Dakota clothes. You'll find, if you look on the internet, Charles Eastman dressed in the European suits as well as full Indian gear, as if Eastman had taken a long journey to civilization and back. The photos of him looking in his Indian clothing were taken when he was old. He passed away in 1939 at the age of 80, was laid to rest in Detroit. His grave was not marked until 1984. Okay, 1984 is a long time. Okay, so we're going to look at Chief Joseph next time, probably tomorrow. It's late, and I don't even know if we have time to do our regular